Hey, it's Joe from Train Out of Pain, coming to you with part two of why light is more important than food if you have fibromyalgia. Today, we're going to be discussing vitamin D. We're going to be discussing vitamin D through food or getting vitamin D through sunlight. When I look back at all the research that I've done over the past few years, vitamin D is something that I have a huge fascination with and the way that it affects our body. And there's a lot of research out there when it comes to vitamin D and fibromyalgia. If you go look on PubMed, you can type in vitamin D and fibromyalgia, and you're going to get dozens and dozens of research papers. You're going to find that there's research papers that are for supplementation of vitamin D, and you're going to find that there are research papers against supplementation of vitamin D. As I have stated before, I am against supplementation with vitamin D. And why is that? Well, we should be getting vitamin D through sunlight. It is a solar hormone, not a vitamin. It is actually a hormone because it turns on about 1,000 other genes in the body, and it has a bunch of other processes that it performs. If we're getting vitamin D through our food, then that is a very different supply source. Foods were initially fortified with vitamin D3 in the 17th century due to outbreaks of rickets in industrialized cities. Big cities like London, where they had a lot of industry, you're going to have a bunch of smog and smoke coming from machinery and from buildings that is actually obscuring the amount of ultraviolet rays and all of the solar spectrum that you can get from the sun. So up to 90% of these kids in these areas were developing over the last few hundred years. So they started to fortify foods with vitamin D2, which is very different from what you get from the sun. Vitamin D2 is derived from plants. It does not perform the same things in your body. So that's a huge problem, and it's the same thing with supplementation too. If you're getting your vitamin D through food or supplementation, you may be raising your numbers. Yes, that is a foregone conclusion. However, you are not turning on those 1,000 genes that you do when you get that from the sun, and that's huge. There has been plenty of research on supplementation, and I want to kind of talk about that really quickly. Because when we talk about fibromyalgia, there's also going to be some type of gastrointestinal issue that is, in association with your fibromyalgia. And if you are supplementing with vitamin D, you can actually be hurting your chances of improving your gut health. A study that came out last year, which was fascinating to me, they basically studied 21 healthy women up in Canada, and they exposed them to the exact same wavelengths of light. And half of them were supplementing and half of them were not supplementing with vitamin D. The ones that were supplementing with vitamin D, their gut microbiome never changed. The ones that were not supplementing with vitamin D, just getting exposure to light, their gut microbiome changed, and they actually changed for the better. They had an increase in 7 different bacteria that were positive bacteria, and most of them digest fiber. Pretty important stuff. So you want to be getting your vitamin D from the sun as much as possible. If you're getting it through the sun, then that means you're also getting all of the other benefits and all of the other compounds and processes that are turned on within the body, all the way down to your hormones and some other beta endorphins that can actually reduce your pain. Okay, so it's really important that you get it from the sun. Now, this time of year, unfortunately, in most of the northern hemisphere, ultraviolet B radiation, ultraviolet B light from the sun is not present, and that is what we need in order to get our sun exposure for vitamin D3. But there are some other things that we need to take into consideration when it comes to your vitamin D and keeping your numbers up. The number one thing that will affect your vitamin D levels outside of your sun exposure is population density. The more heavily populated area that you live in, that will actually reduce the amount of vitamin D that you can produce throughout your skin. I did a test on myself over the summer with this. I actually have an app that I can track my sun exposure, and I can input the level of vitamin D that I had in my last test, and I was only about half of where I should be with my vitamin D levels because I'm going to live in a very populated area and the environment is really, really bad. If you're living, especially in the United States on the eastern seaboard, you are living in an extremely terrible area when it comes to your environment because of population density. The more people you have around you, the more wireless devices you have around you, the more Wi-Fi you have around you, the more Bluetooth you have around you, the more cell phones you have around you, and the more cell phone towers you have around you. That's a big problem. All of those things are detrimental to our vitamin D levels because they basically dehydrate us down to the cellular level, down to our mitochondria. So we need to take those things into account as well. And we need to get sun from places that allow us to keep it for a little bit longer. High UV, going up above 5,000 feet during this time of year. If you're in the wintertime in the Northern Hemisphere, that's one way that you can kind of hack this and get a little bit of ultraviolet B during the wintertime. There's also lamps out there that can create vitamin D during the wintertime. And cold exposure is a way to actually keep your vitamin D levels up during the wintertime too. So I know this was a lot of information today, but vitamin D3 is one of those things that we really need to concentrate on, and concentrate on making it naturally from sunlight if you have fibromyalgia. Supplementing is just not the way to do it. I met somebody recently who takes such a high dosage of vitamin D with their supplements that they actually have to be tested for vitamin D toxicity often. That is never the case if you get it through the sun and you get it naturally. So take all these things into consideration. Go on to PubMed, do a little research yourself, input vitamin D and fibromyalgia, and get your head split open and all the information out there. But I encourage you to research this stuff for yourself so that you can understand it better and that you can affect your body, your biology, and your fibromyalgia at a deeper level. As always, if you guys have any questions, any comments about this, give me a little comment down below, or send me a message if you're not comfortable commenting, and I'll get back to you soon. Hope you found this useful. Coming back to you tomorrow with another part of this, and talk to you soon.